Welcome back to another episode of Snackin with Steve and Skyler.
I'm Steve.
I'm Skyler. Let's get snackin'.
Our last two episodes came at the beginning of the football season. With the season wrapping up, we thought it would be a good way to send football out the door with a Super Bowl episode.
With the LA Rams and the New England Patriots facing off in Super Bowl 53, we decided we'd make a lobster roll that has deep roots in New England,
A French dip originally created in Los Angeles.
and a crowd pleaser with pulled pork nachos.
Let's get cooking. Now we're going to make the French dip. In order to do this, the first thing we're going to do is I have a blend of some spices and herbs here. We have rosemary, thyme, oregano, garlic powder, salt, and pepper. Equal parts of the herbs, 1 teaspoon, also 1 teaspoon of the garlic powder, and then the salt and pepper, just use your eyes. I did 3 heavy pinches of kosher salt and probably 10 to 12 grinds of fresh cracked pepper. First thing we're going to do is score this fat cap that's across the top here to make sure that the seasonings, when we rub it on, can get into the meat and it will accept the flavor. So we're just going to make a couple scores across the fat here. And then when we place this into the pot, we will place the fat cap on top. So as the fat renders out, it will baste the meat and use all of the flavor from the fat to cook through the meat and give us some delicious fat flavor. All right. Now that we've got that done, the next, I would say the most important step, flipping it over and stabbing it so we can stuff it with garlic. We have a saying here on Snackin' with Steve and Skyler: when in doubt, garlic out. So now that we've got that done, time to take our herb and spice mixture and start coating. Before we throw this in the Instapot, the first thing we want to do is brown the outside edges. That's going to get a lot of nice flavor, and also we'll be able to take the fond from the bottom of the pan, deglaze it with some beef broth, and add that to the juice so it's adding even more flavor as we cook. We've got our cast iron skillet here that is heated up nice and hot. Maybe kick it up a little more to make sure we get a good sear. And now we're going to take this big bad boy. I'm going to start with the fat down. Start roasting it off. Some ASMR shit right here. Alright, now that we're on the last side searing, we're getting ready to move it into the Instapot. Make sure, like I mentioned before, this is the fat cap here. We want to make sure that's on top, so as it cooks and renders down, that fat flows through the meat and just adds more and more and more flavor. Alright, let's go. Shove that into the Instapot, and now that we are done in the skillet here, we have all this beautiful fond on the bottom of the pan. We're going to deglaze that with some beef broth that I have here. We're going to take this beef broth and the juices, throw it into the Instapot, so it's got some liquid to cook with. Take the leftover seasonings we have that didn't end up on the roast, sprinkle it on top and in. And the last piece is we have some diced onion here. Now that everything's in, we're going to take the lid, throw it on, make sure it's solid, and we want to pressure cook this for 1 hour. And we're done. Set it and forget it. To go along on the French dip, I want to make some sauteed onions. They're already cut up here with some garlic. I'm going to turn them on to medium-high heat to start. I have here about 2 tablespoons of butter. And to add a little bit of extra flavor, I have my trusty jar of bacon fat. So I'm just going to add a little bit of a scoop here. Maybe a little more. Always season with some kosher salt. Don't go too much. You can always add more later. And some fresh cracked pepper. Now you've got these seasoned up, the butter's starting to melt, the bacon fat's starting to melt. You start to hear some sizzle. We'll mix this up. Let them start to get to know each other a little. Once it gets heated up to temperature, the butter will be melted. We'll throw the temperature down a little bit lower so it cooks over some low and slow time. Nice breakdown, and end up with a beautiful onion jam almost to lay across the bottom of the bun that will then stack the beef on top of and have an awesome sandwich. Alright, now that we have let our onions reduce, as you can see here, they've taken on a nice brown color. You can see all the fond that's built up on the bottom of the pan. Now, we're going to add some sauce. It's going to add some great flavor, and it's going to deepen the brown in these onions even more and give it a gorgeous color. So now that that's mixed in, spread it out so it can keep cooking evenly, and then keep the heat low to medium low so some of that moisture can still continue to evaporate, so when we are ready to put these together, it'll go right on. Next thing we're going to do, the beef is done. Crack, oh yeah. Look at this gorgeous hunk of meat. Now that we've got the beef out of the Instapot, I spread some bacon grease on top of this bun and threw it in the oven to broil and toast a little bit. So now we're going to assemble everything together. The first thing we're going to do is start off on the bottom of the bun. We're going to take some of our reduced onions and spread them in a layer across on the bottom. From there, we are going to take the shredded beef and stack it up. Now that we've got that covered in cheese, stacked up with meat and onions, back on there and back into the oven to melt the cheese. Now that we have removed the sandwich from the oven after a little bit of melting, got a nice cross section of the sandwich there. This is very hot.
Get some jus in there.
Oh yeah, so that's the sandwich, and then here we have our au jus. It was a little bit of beef broth, and then we took the reserves from the Instapot from all the juices and everything from the beef. That went in there. So we've got some of the onion that we put in the Instapot and the different herbs and spices.
Ain't no white man know about no 16 herbs and spices.
And now, cheers.
Fuck me, that's hot.
Mmm.
Fuck yeah. That's some good shit.
That is stupendous.
Much like in our tailgating episodes, this pulled pork nachos recipe is good for any party or get-together. We'll be starting with 3.5 pounds of bone-in pork shoulder. I'm going to place a couple cuts into it on both sides. There. To which I'm going to stick 7 cloves of garlic in. Now that we have the garlic in there, we'll be making our spice mixture. Start with a little brown sugar, some kosher salt, a lot of kosher salt, a little bit of cayenne pepper, some garlic powder, a lot of paprika, some rosemary, and some fresh cracked black pepper. Mix that together, and we're going to rub down the pork butt with our spice mixture. Now that we have the pulled pork rubbed down with our spice mixture, I'm gonna open up the Instant Pot, slap her in there. To add in to the Instant Pot, we'll be adding a little bit of chicken broth or chicken base and some water and some cherry preserve, which will be going into our cherry chipotle barbecue sauce for later. So now that the pork and cherry and everything is in there, we'll add the lid to our Instant Pot, pressure cook for 1 hour, and that's all she wrote. Now we'll be making our cherry chipotle barbecue sauce. First, we'll start off with 1 cup of ketchup, half a cup of cherry jam, a 1/3 cup of brown sugar. Open up a can of chipotle peppers. We'll add in 1 whole chipotle pepper. Next, in here I have 1 teaspoon of garlic, 2 teaspoons of paprika, and 1 teaspoon of cocoa powder, 1 tablespoon of soy sauce, and 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. Woo! 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, 1 tablespoon of the adobo sauce from the can of Chipotles, 1 tablespoon of molasses, and then salt and fresh cracked pepper. And now you're ready to go onto the stove. Whisking it all together to combine, bringing it to a boil. Once it gets to a boil, lower the heat to a simmer, let it simmer for a little bit to thicken up, and then you're good to go. So for the next part of the pulled pork nachos, we're going to be making some beer cheese. We're going to start with 1 ounce of butter. Now that our butter is melted down, add in some of our minced onion. Begin to sweat that. Once we've got that, we're going to take 1 ounce of flour and add that in. And we're going to cook that down until it gets a nice golden color. I'm going to switch to the whisk now, because our roux is almost ready. Once it starts to get a little golden brown in color, like so, we're going to add in half a cup of half and half and half a cup of 2% milk. We're going to stir that so that way hopefully no clumps come out. And 1 full bottle of beer. Today we are using Cabin Fever from New Holland Brewing. Once your beer and milk mixture has started to thicken, go ahead and add 4 ounces of room temperature cream cheese. And now that the cream cheese is finally melted, we'll add 1 pound of shredded cheese. Today we have a sharp cheddar and smoked Gouda. Add that in, not all at once, let it melt down, and then add in the rest once that's finally melted in. And just wait for it to be all nice and homogeneous. And once all your cheese is melted, add a couple dashes of Worcestershire sauce and season with some kosher salt and fresh cracked black pepper. And then your beer cheese is ready to go. So for a garnish for our pulled pork nachos, we're going to take some jalapenos and deep fry them. What I've done already is sliced up some jalapenos and put them in buttermilk. The fat from the buttermilk will help cut that heat from the jalapeno, and plus then it also makes it that much easier to bread in our flour. Remember, when doing stuff like this, always try to make sure you have 1 wet hand and 1 dry hand. Now we'll take our flour-coated jalapenos over to our frying oil, which is at around 350. Drop those in and wait for them to get GBD, golden brown delicious. About halfway through, you want to just give them a little flip. That way they cook nice and evenly. Once they're nice, crispy, and golden brown, take them out of the oil onto a paper towel lined paper. Now that we have everything all set, it's time to assemble. I'm going to start with, I've got a little bacon grease in this pan here because our pulled pork's gotten a little cold. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a nice handful of that and add it to the pan. Let it reconstitute a bit of heat. And also, so we can add our barbecue sauce to it. Take a dollop of that, add that right in there, and let that start to warm up and get to know each other. Once we've got a nice initial bed of tortillas down, we'll take some of our beer cheese and just kind of spread that about. We also shredded up some pepper jack cheese. Turn that off. Kind of dance the pulled pork around, get it spread out a little bit. Do another little layer of chips, some more beer cheese, another nice handful of pepper jack, the rest of our pulled pork, our deep fried jalapenos, a little bit of sliced up scallion to add some extra color on there, and you're ready for game day.
Are you done yet? Because I need to eat some of this.
Get one of them jellies.
Cheers, mate.
It doesn't suck. And that's how you do pulled pork nachos. So for the lobster roll, I'll be showing you how to cook off the lobster tail that we have, and then Steve will be taking over from there. So Steve, why don't you come on in here and join me?
Something doesn't feel quite right, though.
You're right. Lobster powers, activate! Much better.
Boil that lobster.
All right, Steve, bring me the lobster. I'll just set them in there. So, we just have one lobster tail, because it turns out lobster is kind of expensive. But, still very delicious. We're going to take our lobster tail, drop it into a pot of salted boiling water for about 1 minute until it's bright red and fully cooked.
For a little special addition to the lobster rolls, when we make lobster salad, we are also going to add an additional drizzle of some browned butter. Very simple to make. We'll be making half a pound. Just take 2 sticks, throw them in the pot, let it melt, let it boil down, and once it's browned up, strain it through a fine sieve, and you're ready to go.
Now that the lobster should be fully cooked, we will remove it from the pot and go into an ice bath.
Now that the lobster has been boiled and is finishing coming back down to temperature so we can handle it, first thing we're going to do is toast off our bun, lightly buttered, opened, and into a cast iron skillet. And I like to add a little weight to make sure there's contact even all the way around and we get a nice crust across both sides. Nice even crust. While we are waiting for that to brown up, we are going to throw together the parts of the lobster salad that will be going into our lobster roll. The first thing we're going to start with is some diced sweet white onion. Just a little bit of a handful since we're only doing one tail. We don't want to overburden it with onion. Next we have celery. So a staple in any northeastern cuisine is going to be Old Bay seasoning. And Old Bay is essentially paprika, crushed red pepper flakes, and celery seeds. What we're using is celery, and then we're also using the leaves from the center stalks of the celery. Those are an even more concentrated flavor of celery. So we're using that in place of Old Bay. I will also be including some chili powder, essentially ground up red pepper flakes, and paprika. And that bubbling is the browned butter here in the background, working its way to where we want it to add a beautiful sweetness at the end of this dish. So I will add the celery in. It's a nice crunch, not as overpowering as the onions, so we can add a little bit more here. And the last piece we're going to add, a little fun piece I like, again for some more texture with some crunch, is some dill pickle. And about equal parts of the onion and the pickle together, as there's some pretty powerful flavors. We don't want to overpower the lobster, the celery, or any of the other ingredients. The next thing we're going to use is mayonnaise. We don't want to go too heavy. You don't want to take over, again, the flavors of everything with the mayonnaise. We want it to be a slight salad, but we want it to be just barely coating all the other stuff. So we'll start with 1 heaping teaspoon. Next, a squirt of lemon juice to add a little light acidity. Here is where we're going to pull in the paprika and the chili powder to kind of round out that Old Bay seasoning that we're looking for. Just some sprinkles. Paprika has a nice smoky flavor, and then just some regular old chili powder. Chili powder is a little more powerful than the paprika, so be cautious and conservative on your use there. And of course, with everything, some kosher salt and fresh ground black pepper. And now we are going to mix all of this stuff up together and see how it looks. Now that we have most of the salad together and the lobster tail has cooled off, we are now going to break it down, take it out of the shell, and slice it up. First thing you're going to do is take your knife, stab straight down, sharp end away from your fingers. Go through and split it in half one way, flip it around, and split it the other direction. You should now have 2 halves of lobster, and you start pulling it out. Now that you've got your lobster tail out of the tail, we're just going to cut this up into nice bite-sized chunks. Don't want to go too small, but you also got to be able to fit it in your mouth. And that's what she said. Now that you've got your lobster all cut up, time to add it to the rest of the salad mixture here. And now we mix. So you should put the mayonnaise in after you put the lobster in so you can see the ratios. Now that your butter is browned, you want to run it through a fine mesh sieve. Now that you have strained your brown butter into an extra bowl, it's time to throw the sandwich together. So we've got our beautifully toasted bun right here from the cast iron skillet, and we're going to load it up with the lobster salad we made. And now that you've got every piece of lobster on there, we're just going to take a spoon and lightly drizzle the browned butter over top of the lobster salad. And don't be shy. So we have a saying here on Snackin' with Steve and Skyler, mo butter, mo better. And the last thing we're going to do to garnish, a lot of times you see people use parsley, something that's mild in flavor but to add some color. Because we're going for the Old Bay seasoning, we're going to use some more of the celery leaves to add a little bit more of that celery punch and also to make it look a little bit prettier. You close the sandwich up, slice, and boom. You have your lobster roll. Cheers.
Very mayo heavy. But other than that, it's not bad. Due to a late night and a hangry crew, we don't have any food to show you for the end of this episode.
If the result of the Super Bowl is going to be based on the sandwiches we made today, I'm going to put my money on the Los Angeles Rams and the French dip.
I don't know, my money's kind of on the pulled pork nachos.
Would that be the refs?
Nah, commercials.
Bad joke. 10-yard penalty. Must do dishes.
The Super Bowl is a great opportunity to gather family and friends to enjoy football, commercials, and delicious food.
Let us know how you make these recipes your own to spice up your game day.
And until next time, keep snacking. Oh, it's so beautiful.
A little bit of...
Oh my God! Stephen Patrick, you're a motherfucking genius!
Baby, I know it.
My bad.
And catapulted.
Molasses. Huh? Molasses.
Fucking hell. Thanks. Not ready to go onto the stove yet. And one. Also, I just realized I'd lied. There's a Chipotle in there. A full one. So, you have to blitz it with the stick blender.
Sorry.
It looks like a sex toy from the 1960s.
Jalapeno, jalapeno. Mayonnaise.
Blech. Yeah. God, we're dumb.
Oh, I can't wait for that to be in there.
Yo. I shouldn't have come over tonight.
Can't fucking do it.
You want to try? Or do you want nothing to do with all the mayonnaise?
I'm good. Thanks.
It's
It's okay. Most of what you guys do is bullshit.
Yeah.
You fucking tell me about it.